So I don't know if you saw what was in the videos behind me in the previous ones that I've released recently, but now we are going to get into reviewing and unveiling these Gillo limbs. So these are the Gillo GTL88 Carbon Limbs. That's a mouthful. So one of my patrons enabled me to test out this equipment, and I'm very excited to be able to try these out. So I'm going to see how they align on the Gillo GT and shoot some arrows through them and see what I find. For those of you that are new here, my name is Jake Kaminski. I'm a two-time Olympic silver medalist in the sport of archery. I'm working to make this channel a great resource to all types of archery. So if you haven't yet, hit that subscription button and the notification bell. That way you're notified every time a new video is uploaded. I'd appreciate it. So if you watch the Gillo GT review videos, many of them, you'll know that I had a bit of issues aligning limbs in the riser. So apparently these limbs align much easier in the riser, in their own riser, according to Gillo. So I'm going to try them out, and we're going to see how it goes. If you haven't watched the actual Gillo GT review itself, there'll be links in the description below, plus I'll put the card at the top here. There is 4 videos in that series because of my difficulty getting the limbs to be aligned. And, well, it wasn't a difficulty in limbs being aligned, it was a difficulty of getting the limbs out of the riser after they were aligned. So these limbs are aligned, and I can't get them out. So I'm going to have to loosen up the adjustment blocks, or the adjustment screws, and go from there. And hopefully we'll be able to see and compare what I'm looking at in the differences of the limbs that I had available to me, which are the Win MXTs. These are the GWs. I have the GFs over there as well, but they would not come in and out of the riser relatively easy. So I'm going to try it with the Gillo limbs, and I expect things to go a little bit better. I hope they do. So apparently these limbs, meaning the Gillo limbs, are manufactured by Win for Gillo, which is cool. I'm a big fan of Win stuff, and I do like Gillo. You know, Fran Gili and Michele are great people. So I'm excited to be able to try their limbs. Supposedly, the limb that itself, the actual curve design, is very similar between the two. What somebody had told me, and I imagine you can guess who that was, told me that the curve of the limb Gillo came up with, and then Win replicated it for their own purposes. And it indeed looks like it's the same exact curve design between the two. You know, the Gillos have a much more traditional limb wedge here. This is just a flat surface here. This one's, you know, fancy and tapered, and the same goes on the back of the new Win are fancy, whereas, you know, the standard Gillos are pretty standard for ILFs. They don't have all this extra fancy flat material, and it's not thinner through here. You know, it's fairly standard. Let's compare the curves on the NS limbs to the Gillo limbs and see if they're any different. And it looks like they are slightly different. Yeah, you can see the Gillos have more recurve than the NS limbs do. So the limb shape is slightly different indeed, and it does appear that the new Win are shaped the same as the Gillos. So it may be in fact true that Gillo came up with this and Win replicated it in their own product line. I can tell from experience shooting the Win limbs that they are very smooth and they feel really good. Even on this riser cranked all the way in, they still felt surprisingly very good, and I was actually surprised myself and noted that in the review of the Gillo GT. So I expect very similar draw force curves within this limb itself. They'll be less likely to stack, most likely, through the clicker. Now, excuse me, one of the things that was mentioned by Gillo to me is that their dovetail design has a very high tolerance rating and in their bow, and it really works well with their limbs. So I can, you know, and they also mentioned that the dovetail spring in many limbs are too heavy compared to what they prefer. And just sitting here and squeezing these two, I can tell you for sure that the Gillo pin is actually much easier to push in There's probably a different spring, as well as the shape of the detent itself is different. The Gillo is much more blunt and round, where the Win & Win is much more pointy and narrow. And that's on their newest limb. On their older limbs, it appears that the detent itself has not changed from year to year. The dovetail on the NS limbs is different than the MXT limb. The dovetail on the MXT has a bit of a blunt on the sharp pointy area. And then the Gillo itself looks like to be more rounded than anything else. Yeah, it's a very round object. So I'm gonna get my whiteboard and draw, or actually I'm gonna show you close-ups here of what I'm talking about between the three different dovetails and detents. So I'm gonna place these in front of you, and you're gonna see on this far, well, it'll be your left. Your left is the NS, the middle is the MXT, and then the Gillo is on your right. So anyway, you can see that the NS limb is a very pointy, more sharp angled dovetail. The next one, the MXT, has this flat surface halfway through the pointy area of the dovetail, and then the Gillo itself looks very round and smooth compared to the other two. It is very similar. It's kind of actually a hybrid, I guess, between the other two, as far as a little more blunt, but it's rounded instead of flattened. So they definitely are different detents, and hopefully that'll help the limb installment and removal issues a little bit better. Something else that is interesting is that it looks like the dovetail itself protrudes further through the limb than this. The limb itself in the area of the dovetail, it's actually thicker on the Gillo by a small margin. You know, I'd say maybe a couple thousandths, maybe 10, 15 thousandths of an inch or so. This part of the limb is thinner on thicker on the Gillo, but their dovetail sticks out further. So all those things might, you know, combine into an easier to align limb. You know, the one thing about it though is that it's not as positive as an engagement in the way that it feels, because the spring in the actual detent is a little bit less. Not a problem. It just slides in actually a little bit easier, but it doesn't feel like it's engaged quite as strong. So we'll see if there's any sort of issue with the limbs wanting to come out as I'm stringing it. I doubt it, but you never know. That could be something. So as you could see before, all I had to do was crack the adjustments loose, the actual grub screws that tighten this upper limb into place. So I'm just going to snug them back down and just out of curiosity see if I can get the limb out. And it looks like I can. I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's not too difficult, so that's good to see. Hopefully that continues as I'm actually aligning this bow, because I would love to get to shoot this a lot sooner than the last time I set up this riser. I was very happy with how the riser felt, and very happy to feel what an actual bare bow riser feels like, especially at full draw, you know, due to it being asymmetrical. So I'm really actually very excited to be able to shoot some limbs that this company makes, because if their risers are this good, hopefully their limbs are as good as they as the riser is. So it came in the box as fairly standard for limbs. You've got your standard limb sleeves with some nice, these are relatively thin, but they are felt in the inside, or something along those lines. It comes with this little foam protector over the dovetail. Actually, there is no manual, just a bit on Frangili, but the riser has a relatively good manual to reference. So I'm going to assume if you're buying these limbs, you've already got one of these risers. So I've got the limbs in their correct position, the upper and the upper, the lower and the lower. The string should be pretty close to where I want it to be. It fell on the floor and probably untwisted a little bit, but I'm going to be assuming it's close. So right where the string is ending, near the limb, the limb groove is ending right where the string is right now. That's why you hear this buzz. I hope that wasn't too loud. It was right next to the microphone, but definitely got a hum after it, which is, you know, relatively normal. It doesn't mean that my brace height's correct, so I'll check all that. Yeah, I mean, the brace height's extremely low, which is interesting. It could be that the string has taken a set after being strung up for so long, so I'm going to throw the other limbs back in because I just want to see if these limbs themselves are actually having more preload than my other limbs. They're the same exact weight. These are 42 longs. Actually, they're 2 pounds heavier. These are 42 longs, and the limbs that I use are 40 longs. But that little bit of difference in weight is not going to account for over a ½ inch in brace height changing. Big difference between these and those. That was a high frequency hum. This is a much low frequency hum. Wood limbs. So brace height on this, just over 8 5/8. So my brace height has dropped a lot because the string has took a set. This bow has been strung at full draw, not at full draw, but it's been strung since the videos that I did of reviewing it. So it's been strung for a couple weeks. Lower limb, upper limb. They definitely do go in easier. So now that vibration, it's no longer in the limb itself, it's the actual grub screws. All right, I'm at 8 7/8 or 22.5 centimeters, which is right about where I like to shoot my long-limbed bows. So I'm gonna leave it there for now. I'm gonna leave the M6 bolt tight because it'll have a lot less tendency to have that the limb adjuster block pivot and cock sideways like I was dealing with. So I'm just gonna leave them tight and adjust the limbs from there, and then hopefully be able to get the limbs out. Sorry for a bit of the jump cut. My phone ran out of storage space, so I missed about 3 minutes of me figuring out stuff. So what I found was this tiller was positive compared to negative with the other limbs. The other limbs I had at negative ¼ inch, and right now it was a positive 1/8. I adjusted that by backing the bottom limb bolt out about a full turn, and now I'm at a ¼ negative tiller, so that means it's bigger on the bottom than the top. And then I tightened the grub screws to see if I could get that vibration to go away, and it wouldn't go away. After I adjusted my brace height, the upper serving stopped vibrating against the limb, and then it switched to the grub screws vibrating. Tightened the grub screws back up, adjusted my tiller, and the vibration's gone from the grub screws being loose, but now it's back because of the tiller change from the serving vibrating on the limb. Something I'll just have to deal with, and it's not a big deal. And I noticed as I was putting on these biter blocks that this upper limb is actually, or both limbs, are a little bit narrower than the win-and-win limbs that I have. So for what that's worth, they are slightly narrower. Something that I did check and that I found, and I really should show you, because many people ask about this, especially barebow shooters, because they've seen my videos where I'm aligning my limbs and I use a stabilizer as a reference instead of the center of the riser. And they always say, hey, what's a good limb, what's a good stabilizer to use or to buy that is straight? And my response is always, I'm sorry, I can't tell you because they are very inconsistent in the way they are built. So for example, here's a prime example. Here's an HMC Plus from Win-and-Win, one of their top-of-the-line stabilizers, extremely popular in the archery world. And watch when I screw this one in. Do my best to hold it still. If you look closely, you'll see the end of the stabilizer going in a circle. So this one's not straight, despite it being a good quality, high-dollar stabilizer. And this cheapy Cartel Maxian, I don't know if it's still available, but it was the cheapest Cartel available. Dead straight. So cheap stabilizer straight, expensive stabilizer not straight. So it's really hit or miss, and you just got to try to find one that's good. All right, let's see if it's aligned. Top one's good, bottom one's just a little off. So we'll fix that. As I adjust the bottom in place, the top one is now out a little bit. So if you look really close to what I'm doing, I cracked this side free and I'm going to push it this way. And it's going to be too tight because I have that M6 bolt too tight. So once I know that it's snug, I come back off of it, and then I just touch it. I'm just touching the adjustment block, just as Gillo suggests. And then I check the other side to make sure as well. So it's just touching, it's not any tighter than that. I moved it just a bit too much, unfortunately. See, if I could leave this real tight, I would be a bit more confident in my ability to move it without going too far or too little. It's just a bit complicated having to do it this way, which I get. It's all right. High performance stuff, there's a bit of finesse that is required. All right, so the limbs are aligned now. We'll call that good. And I will put these grub screws in snug-ish. I don't have a non-permanent Loctite still, so I should get some. Again, I'm just snugging the lock screws. I'm not reefing them tight because I know that it can move the inner adjusters and put pressure on the pivot blocks. So I'm genuinely doing my best to make sure I don't put too much tension on them and cause the limbs to bind into place to give this the best chance. So as I put this in, we'll pluck it, see if it sounds any different. Sometimes it does. You'd be surprised how well a good aligned bow feels compared to one that's not. Still feels good. So, moment of truth. Drum roll. Holy shnikes. Holy shnikes. Limbs come out. So, maybe Gillo is correct in saying that their risers will work with their limbs. May not work with others. You know, I've had a lot of people discussing on my Discord server that's attached to my Patreon page. And a lot of people are, you know, going back and forth about this and the fix and you know, how to make it better and potential options to offer. And I do like what some of them came up with was have two different blocks, like one that's this gold version that's super high tolerance, and then come with a silver version, a silver anodized 7075 aluminum block, so meaning less good quality and a little bit sloppier in the tolerances, so you could shoot with other limbs and not have them get jammed in the riser. I think that was a great idea. So if you're interested in partaking in that Discord server, again, it's only for patrons of my channel, people that support this channel. So if you're interested in becoming a Patreon member, there will be links in the description below, plus I'll put a card at the top right here for you to check that out. There's many benefits, including that Discord server, like discounts to apparel, and also coaching options too. So please check that out if you're interested. So I am very happy to see that I can get the limbs out and see how it feels. Feels a little heavier than the others. These are 2 pounds heavier limbs, so I've got to check the weight on them and see where I'm at on that. But they do feel pretty good. However, they do feel like they stack a little bit more than the Win-N-Win limbs. Yeah, I feel like they're a little spongier down at brace height compared to the Win-N-Win GFs, MXT GFs. And then through the clicker zone, these they feel like they come on a little bit heavier sooner. Again, that could be because of the actual bow weight itself. So I'm going to check that out and make sure that that's not wrong or anything like that. But overall, like first impressions of these limbs, I believe they feel pretty good. The quality looks great. I like that it's nothing fancy. I'm always one for a minimalist design that doesn't need all these extra fancy components in the limb itself. Like, you know, the very basic butt of the limb here is nice because there's less time spent in finishing them and less time spent in developing new products. This is something that's tried and true and works really well, and there's no issue with it. So I like it, and so that means that they can either sell them for less price because there's less complicated designs going into it, or they put higher quality grade materials in here and sell them for the same price as the other high quality, high price limbs. Something that I just noticed now, right here on the base of the limb, if you can see that white spot, it looks like a piece of the clear coat is not adhered to the carbon, the base carbon. I didn't drop these limbs or damage them at all. You saw exactly what I was doing with them. I haven't touched them outside of this video. Can't get it to come up very easily. There's a little bit of a bump there, so I don't know what that is. It really looks like the clear coat's wanting to lift off, but it's a super hard clear coat, the same as the regular Win and Wins, because they're made in China. Win and Wins are made in Korea, or at least the MXTs are. So are the NS limbs. So these are made in the carbon factory in China that Win and Win runs. I can't get it to come off, so I'm going to expect that it's totally fine. It's just something that I noticed. Fitment of the actual groove of the limb on the limb bolt is hard to isolate. It is really loose. It is not... I can get the limb to rock back and forth, but I can't get it to slap and like go like this back and forth. But it is so loose compared to the Win and Wins. See, I could almost hold the whole riser up by the limb. It's tighter. The Win and Win's more snug compared to the Gillos. Same thing, it's super loose on this limb bolt. Yeah, so I can move them actually. I'm gonna show you up close. So here's a regular Win and Win limb bolt. And there's definitely play in it. So with this limb, there's no play because it's snug at all, left and right. Even a heavily used limb, even tighter, like it doesn't move at all in this limb. Doesn't want to fall out. Like if I put it in, the limb bolt stays in place, right? Now, the MXT GWs, new limb stays in place. A new Gillo, so it's all the way down. I mean, obviously it's very loose, all the way down, and it falls out. So it's not tight. What I'm going to suggest, this is part of the reason potentially why the limbs come out of the bow so easily. I don't like this. I wish it was a little bit tighter. This could be an anomaly. I feel it in that bow, but I don't want to take the limb bolts out. But this one here, clearly, you can see it's wanting to fall out. So what, and if I move it like this, side to side, I can feel play. I can, you know, make this thing move in this plane, like that rotational axis, but also move it left and right. I can feel play. So what that may do is that may actually change the alignment of the bow itself periodically when the limb bolts shift in different spots. So to me, if it was up to me, this wouldn't have passed quality control. Now this is the one with that little white dot, that chip. This one would be better. So it goes in. I don't think it'll come out all the way, but in towards the base of the limb itself, there's that little bit of play going on. So that's interesting to see. That's definitely something to note. I'm not a fan of that. I would like to see a little bit more tolerance there. And I haven't shot these limbs yet. You can see what that riser is doing to the limbs just from putting them in and out and plucking them. The riser's a little sharp there, as discussed in the other videos, but this is about the limbs. So what I think about these limbs, just the initial impression of them, is they are very nice limbs themselves. The actual torsional rigidity of the limb isn't quite as high as the MXT GWs. And as far as these NS limbs, They seem to be a bit more torsionally rigid than the NS limbs, as far as what I can feel. The NS limbs are 40 pounds, so are these. These are 42s, so you can expect these to be slightly different. Unfortunately, I didn't get 40s, but these are, you know, going to work for me to play with. So nice to see. Again, quality of finish, excellent. I'm concerned about that one limb and the width of this. The fit and finish is, you know, leaves a little bit to be desired. The limb tip grooves are fairly similar looking to the majority of most other limbs themselves. I would say that the Gillos are a bit more of the old school variety with more rounded areas, which I am happy to see. Something that I had an issue with my win and wins from time to time, right where the string groove wraps over the tip and then comes down to the flat side of the limb, I would get abrasion and wear on my serving right there. This is really nice and radiused and smooth, and so I think that strings will last longer on the limb tips, so that's good to see. You know, I'm happy with it. I think it looks great, and I'm excited to go shoot them. So please, like I said, comment below on which round you want me to tune these for. I'll be tuning and setting up for that round. I'll shoot around with them, and we'll see what I think of these limbs. I'll put them side to side along these other limbs that I've got too, and we're gonna do some testing, some actual testing on limbs, and see what happens when we try to get some measurements and baseline testing done with things you can actually measure that are not just anecdotal evidence of what I think and feel. So that'll be interesting, and I'm very excited about that, and that'll be coming out relatively soon, at least in the near future. So yeah, like I said, please comment below which round you would like me to tune for. I'll probably eventually tune for all the rounds with different bows and different setups. So I guess it's not super important which one to pick right away, but yeah, we'll see what happens. Anyway, take care. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like this video, consider hitting the subscription button and the notification bell, as well as the like button. I would appreciate it. Also, please consider supporting my channel if you head to my website, jakekaminski.com. There'll be info and links on Patreon, apparel, books, and equipment sales, PayPal donate button, a P.O. box to send things to, and above all else, please share this video because there's no better advertising than word of mouth.